Blizzard by Patricia Bear. The weather changed that Sunday, March 11th, 1888. When Ma, Pop, and Thomas were walking home from Grandma Long's house, the rain became icy. The sidewalk was so thick with ice that it was 20 minutes before they reached their front door. That was where Pop slipped and fell. By midnight, the rain had turned to snow, and Pop's ankle had swollen to twice its normal size. Thomas heard hushed voices in the room next to his as he tried to fall asleep. He knew what Ma and Pop were saying. If Pop couldn't go to work the next day, he might lose his job. There weren't nearly as many jobs as there were people in New York City. Mr. DeWitt, Pop's boss at the coal company, had said that some days as many as 10,000 foreigners arrived on the city's docks. Thomas had seen the neighborhoods, the tenements, where some of the newcomers lived. "It's like taking your life in your hands to go into one of those neighborhoods," Mr. DeWitt had warned. "Men slouch in doorways and wait for you and your wallet to pass by." He added, "When those foreigners arrive, they think they'll find big houses, big money, big opportunities. The plain truth is, there's not enough to go around. They should get on a ship and steam back to where they came from," Mr. DeWitt had said. Imagining how many people would love to have Pop's job, Thomas got out of bed and padded into his parents' bedroom. "I'll take Pop's place at work tomorrow," he announced. 6 hours later, Thomas bundled himself in his warmest clothes and started off. Pushing himself through the storm, Thomas came to places where snowdrifts towered over his head. 4 separate times, the wind blew him into snowbanks. Worry kept him going, though. Worry about Pop losing his job. When Thomas stumbled into Mr. DeWitt's place, Al, the dispatcher, shoved an address into Thomas's hands and pointed to the loaded cart of coal he was to take. Thomas was backing Ada, the horse, into the cart shafts when Al appeared carrying a horse blanket. "You can throw this over yourself. You'll be all right as long as you keep moving. Remember, Thomas, don't stop." The weather seemed much worse once Thomas was perched on the bench seat of a wagon with no protection from the storm. Snow spun around him so thickly that he had to close his eyes. Soon, there was so much snow on the horse that she looked more white than brown. Thomas saw a policeman pull his passerby out of the storm in order to rub his ears. Thomas put his hands up to check his own. He couldn't feel them. Dropping Ada's reins, Thomas rubbed until his ears hurt. By the time Thomas picked up the reins again, the cart was stuck in the snow. Thomas jumped from his seat. He floundered through the snow to Ada's head. "You'll be all right as long as you keep moving," Al had told him. But he had stopped. Thomas trudged to the rear of the cart and pushed. Already the wheels had sunk in deep. More snow was piling around them. There was nothing to do but unhitch Ada and try to make it back to the stable. But when he looked around, Thomas was confused over how to get back to the stable. Street signs were crusted over with snow. Everything looked strange. "Where am I?" he shouted. Thomas would have cried if he weren't afraid the tears would freeze on his cheeks. When Mr. DeWitt learned he'd abandoned a full cartload of coal, Pop would certainly lose his job. Tenements loomed on both sides. Mr. DeWitt had warned him never to stray into the immigrant neighborhoods, and now he was smack in the middle of one. Suddenly, he saw dark figures coming toward him through the snow. The wagon's stuck," he told them. "Can somebody give me a hand? Please, I just want to get the horse back to the stable." The figures were women and girls, wearing thin shawls and carrying pails and tin cans. An old woman held up a coin. Thomas understood. They wanted to buy coal. Thomas charged a dime the way the grocery stores did. As he took each empty container, he imagined a family shivering inside a tenement house. Handing it back filled, he pictured how happy everyone would be when the coal was burning. Before he knew it, the cart emptied and his pockets filled. One small girl produced only a nickel. Thomas filled her can to the top anyway. She stayed until all the coal was gone. Then she helped Thomas free Ada from the cart shafts and pointed his way back. Finally, Back safely at Mr. DeWitt's place, Thomas told Mr. DeWitt, "I collected over $7. "But my cart is left out on the street somewhere," Mr. DeWitt said. "I'm afraid you'll never be a good businessman, Thomas, if you simply charge the going rate," Mr. DeWitt went on. "A boy with more vision would have upped that price considerably. Yes, sir, a boy with more vision could have charged $15 or maybe even 30 a can." "But they were poor people," Thomas tried to explain. "They couldn't afford to pay that much." Mr. DeWitt shook his head as he tucked a thick, soft scarf around his neck and headed for the door. "Those foreigners should go back where they came from," he repeated. "You'll never be a good businessman." Thomas felt flattened. Once Thomas had talked about leaving school to get a job, and Pop wouldn't hear of it. "I don't want you driving a coal cart like me," he had said. "I want you to be a good businessman." And now Mr. DeWitt had told him flat out that was exactly what Thomas wasn't and never would be. By the time Thomas reached home, his coat was glazed into a near solid sheet of ice. "We were so worried," Ma cried, pulling off his boots. "How did it go?" Pop demanded. Thomas told them all that had happened. Remembering Mr. DeWitt, Thomas said, "I guess I could have made more money by charging extra. I just didn't think of it." "And if you had thought of it," Mom wanted to know, "would you have charged them extra?" Thomas was eager to have Pop believe he could someday be a good businessman, but when he opened his mouth to answer yes, he remembered the girl with the nickel. Hanging his head, he admitted the truth. "No, I don't suppose I would have. I even gave one girl extra coal." For a long moment, all Thomas heard was the storm outside the window. He was sure Pop was disappointed. After a while, Pop cleared his throat. "Once, that girl might have been my grandmother," he said softly. "You know, I'm only second generation here. My father lived for years in a building like the ones you saw today." Thomas's thoughts swirled like the snow outside. He thought of the 10,000 people who were arriving in America each day. He was awfully glad there hadn't been people like Mr. DeWitt waiting on the docks when Pop's family had arrived. As Thomas slipped into sleep, he remembered giving the girl with a nickel a full can of coal. The thought made him glad. The blizzard of 1888. The New York City Weather Service had called for March 12, 1888 to start out cloudy and then turn fair and colder. No one was ready for what came. About 400 people died in the blizzard. Some had accidents or became sick after braving the weather. Others simply collapsed and froze under drifted snow. Those safe at home suffered shortages of coal.